This started with my great-grandparents. We've been working at this for well over 150 years, and we would like to finish it in this generation. We do not want our grandchildren and children to carry this burden any further. We want them to begin with a clean slate.
Thousands of years ago, a group of people from the city of Tamlaham in the Upper Skeena discovered the canyon on the Skeena and made it their home. They became known as Kitselas, the people of the canyon. The area around the canyon, with fertile valleys, rich in wildlife and resources, provided for all of their needs. Resources were abundant for trade with the Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan in the east, the Haida, the Tsimshian, and the Gitxaala in the west, the Niska, Tahltan, and Tlingit in the north, and the Haisla to the south. Our people lived, worked, and defended their homelands as an independent people and governed themselves without any outside interference. Outside interference began on the other side of the world, and our ancestors had no way of knowing it was happening. The 7 Years' War between England, France, and Spain ended in 1763 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. The treaty awarded Louisiana to Spain, some Caribbean islands to France, and England won sovereignty over Canada.
We first experienced contact with the British in 1793 when Captain George Vancouver started exploring the North Coast. And during that time they discovered a lot of furs. We had control of the fur supply, so it was really in our favor that we were trading with them.
The native people far outnumbered the newcomers and prevented them from exercising British sovereignty and taking our lands. To maintain their sovereignty, the British began to build forts. Fort Victoria, Fort Fraser, Fort Simpson. Inside their forts, they created small pockets of British soil. Outside the forts, the lands and resources still belonged to the native peoples. But as more and more forts were built all over what is now British Columbia, British sovereignty expanded. Explorers soon discovered how rich our lands were, and more people came to make money, to return to their homelands wealthy. The discovery of gold and silver and the expanding fur trade on the Upper Skeena brought trappers, miners, and prospectors. Millions of salmon returned to the Skeena and its tributaries every year, so greedy industrialists built canneries to can and export the abundant fish in our waters. Giant spruce, cedar, and hemlock grew in the rich soil of the northern valleys, so they built sawmills and eventually pulp mills. Before settlement began, the canyon's location allowed us to manage the river and to collect fees from anyone passing through the canyon. But in 1872, the British sent in a military expedition up the Skeena to take control of the river. After the military came with their gunboats, we no longer had control of the river at the canyon. In 1876, the first Indian Act was passed in the Parliament of Canada. One of the purposes of the Act was to reduce the homelands of Canada's native people to reserves. Indian reserves did not exist before 1876. The Indian Act reached us in 1901, and the reserves we now live on were measured and staked. As a result, the lands of the Kitselas people were reduced from 220,000 hectares to 1,200 hectares.
The land on which we used to get our living, it is gone. Where we used to go hunting, it is gone. Where we used to pick berries, it is gone. And why? Because the government stepped in and without giving us a cent, took all our land away.
Chief Samuel Wise of the Kitselas tribe, 1915.
The governments of Canada and British Columbia will never be able to make the changes in law needed to correct the wrongs of the past. The loss of our lands, the loss of our resources, our ability to govern ourselves, and the disappearance of an ancient way of life can never be reversed by Canada. The only way to change things, and to change them for all time, is to negotiate a treaty with Canada and British Columbia.
Today, the Kitselas people, we currently reside on very small parcels of land. The Kulsby Reserve, the Gittas Reserve, and Endadoon, and 4 other reserves, and all combined, the acreage is approximately 3,000 acres, and the traditional territory was approximately 6,000 square kilometers.
Most of our people live in terrace and work, go to school, and live pretty much like other terrace residents. Busy with our everyday lives, we don't think much about the injustices done to our forefathers and what our rights are as Kitselas. Archaeological research and excavations at the Kitselas Canyon show that our people have lived here for over 5,000 years. All these thousands of years, we've enjoyed these lands freely. Will we ever be able to enjoy these lands and resources again? Can we regain the rights and freedom we once had? Only through treaty. How will treaty restore our rights? Well, let's look at 6 key points.
1. A treaty will define and restore our lands.
When British Columbia joined the Dominion of Canada in 1871, it took the stand that Aboriginal titles simply did not exist. As a result, they used and took our lands at their whim. Our people made numerous complaints to the federal government during the late 1800s and early 1900s, to no avail. Canada finally recommended that British Columbia allot 80 acres to every native family of 5, but the province flatly refused, instead allotting the Kitselas reserve lands amounting to 20 acres per family. This meant that our people received only 4 acres each of our original lands. However, British Columbia passed the Homestead Act in 1904, which said that any person, except an Indian or Chinese, could take an entire 160 acres anywhere on the Skeena River free of charge. The first homesteader, Mr. Durham, took his 160 acres just west of the Kitselas Canyon. This was the beginning of losing ownership and control of our homelands to private property owners.
Our grandfathers could no longer go to their hunting places because they were not allowed to leave the reserves. They were like really imprisoned on the reserves.
A treaty can address the loss of our land. We will never get it all back because most of our land is owned by private citizens. These private citizens are now our friends and neighbors. Through negotiations, we will identify the location and amount of lands the Kitselas will own exclusively. The treaty will establish areas that Kitselas can continue to use and carry out our traditional activities such as hunting and fishing on Crown lands. As owners of this land, we will have the authority to manage it in ways that will preserve it for all time. The Kitselas Nation is already managing and administering our reserve lands under the Land Management Act. We can build on these recent land initiatives in the treaty. Land is important to our people because it's only with a land base that our new government can operate. Certainty means that our lands and the authority over its resources will be clearly defined in law.
2. A treaty will provide us with access to natural resources.
Beginning in 1910, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway brought many, many people to our area who hauled away trainload after trainload of our valuable resources.
The Royal Commission of Indian Affairs, meeting with Kitselas Chief Walter Wright, April 15, 1915.
When they were building the railway, they took a lot of wood from our reserves without asking any permission from the Indians. We want to know we can collect any money from those people who took our wood from our reserves.
That's something you have to take up with your Indian agent, Mr. Loring.
Well, we told them about it, but I don't seem to make any headway in the matter.
We'll bring that to the notice of your Indian agent, but for now, we want a list of the things in your reserve, the horses, the pigs, the animals, that kind of thing. Can you do that for us, please?
Even though the resources belong to us, we were never paid for them. Under the Indian Act, we were not allowed to sell any of our own resources or anything from our nation, In fact, if we wanted to start a business, we had to get permission from Indian Affairs. A treaty will change that. While we cannot hope to regain all of our lands and all of its resources, a treaty can recover some of the remaining resources like fish and timber. Once again, we will be able to harvest, manage, and sell our valuable natural resources as our ancestors did in the past. Once again, we will be able to use the resources, the timber and other plants, fish, migratory birds, and wildlife, and return to our historic use and ties to the land. A treaty will ensure that every one of our harvesting rights are negotiated and protected by law and the Canadian Constitution.
3. A treaty will remove the burden of the Indian Act.
When the Indian Act was created, it was designed to control every aspect of the lives of Canada's Aboriginal peoples. A few years later, it was amended to make all cultural and religious ceremonies illegal, including the potlatch.
A lot of the people were required to destroy the totem poles. We had to have our feasts in disguise. We couldn't just outright, celebrate a proper feast.
Lobbying for our land rights became a criminal offense. It was even against the law for us to raise money or retain a lawyer to pursue our land claims. Under the Indian Act, Canada's Aboriginal people are managed and controlled by the Minister of Indian and Northern Affairs.
The minister has the power to make laws about us and over us, and he does that by proposing laws to Parliament. And he can make regulations, he can formulate policy, and they can enact policy. Even though band councils can make bylaws, all those bylaws must go to the minister for his approval.
As time marches on and the rest of the world and Canada make progress and succeed in their dreams, the Kitselas people are held further and further behind by the Indian Act and a system that is no longer relevant. The treaty will unshackle us from the burden of Indian affairs, as the Indian Act will no longer apply to us. We will be free from it forever.
4. A treaty will restore our self-government and our independence.
In 1910, the hereditary chief's authority over the Kitselasu was replaced by an Indian agent from Indian Affairs, who appointed a chief and council. This, in effect, ended the Kitselas people's self-government. With treaty, the current Kitselas Band Council will be replaced by a new Kitselas government, with our own decision-making capabilities and our own responsibilities. Similar to a local government, we will make the laws over our lands and on key issues that affect our people. We will determine our own citizenship, voting process, and structure of our own government. We can create and manage our own civil and property rights and the capability whereby full home ownership is possible. We must make our own laws that govern us in ways that will allow us to preserve our history, our culture, our identity, and that will determine our own futures.
5. A treaty can restore and protect our Aboriginal rights.
The Kitselas were optimistic when the McKenna-McBride Commission was established to examine the reserve system and to protect it. The Kitselas people made passionate pleas for freedom from oppression, but none of our Aboriginal rights were either recognized or restored. Rather, the Commission recommended that more Aboriginal lands be taken and replaced with less valuable land. The Tsimshian recognized that we needed treaties because our rights were continually being violated, and we knew there was no other way to protect our rights. As early as 1910, the Kitselas traveled to Ottawa with the Kitwankul people to meet with Prime Minister Sir Wilfrid Laurier in an attempt to negotiate a treaty with Canada.
They declared all together in a group that we are free men and we want to remain free. And it never happened for them.
We fought hard to have a treaty process put in place. Finally, during the 1970s, the Supreme Court of Canada affirmed that Aboriginal rights and land title do exist in law, and that British Columbia has a duty to consult and possibly accommodate Aboriginal interests. The Kitselas people made a united decision to enter treaty process in 1993. Working with other Tsimshian towards a treaty gives us strength to negotiate, but it still allows the Kitselas the autonomy to make our own treaty. Having a treaty will restore and protect our Aboriginal rights and is the only instrument that can finally settle the 150-year-old injustices done to our people.
6. The treaty will ensure us economic and social improvements.
The Indian Act and the provincial and federal policies have hurt us as a people. Today, only a small percentage of Kitselas graduate from high school, while a majority of Canadians have their diplomas. Almost half of our people cannot find work, while most Canadians have jobs. Our social economic status needs to be at least comparable to mainstream society. We're so involved in our day-to-day lives that we don't appreciate how much better our lives should and could be. We are at the gateway of once again accessing the rich resources that inherently belong to us and using them to create a better life for our people. With treaty, we will have the economic stability to develop health and social programs designed for and by the Kitselas. We can create our own educational initiatives and youth incentives that will develop the talents and skills of our most precious resource, our children. Who knows the real problems, challenges, and dreams we face better than our own people? Through treaty, we ourselves can ensure the overall health, growth, and well-being of our people. Because our land base will be defined and we will be making our own laws, we will have endless financial opportunities. The Kitselas Canyon National Historic Site is an example of the type of economic initiative that we can create.
This is our cultural tourism development that we've been undertaken since 2001. And this center will be a place where our people can reconnect with our culture and also express our history and culture to visitors that come to our area.
Ecotourism, fisheries, forestry, mining, hunting, trapping, and in many other forms of self-sustaining industries will again take place through which all Kitselas can benefit. It may take several generations before we see the fruition of these initiatives, but it will be well worth the wait when our children and grandchildren reap the benefits of our wise choices.
If we're successful in negotiating a treaty for our people, it will not only benefit our people, but it will, I think, benefit our neighbors, such as the city of Terrace. We will hopefully be able to build relationships with other First Nations, municipalities, and regional districts. A prime example is the industrial development surrounding the Terrace Airport, in which we are partners with the city of Terrace.
There will also be financial opportunities for individuals and community groups to flourish economically.
The House of Carvers is a group of 4 of us. We will have our official opening August 3rd. Being a Native-owned business, it's just something we've always wanted to do.
As a self-sustaining government, we will eventually collect taxes to support our own operation and initiatives for our people. For example, there may be the possibility for you as Kitselas to start a business. The possibilities are limited only by our imaginations. With treaty and economic sustainability, we will have proper resources to define and re-explore our culture, such as with our language, our clans, and our history. We had a taste of what is possible in August 2007 when the village of Kitselas had the first totem pole raising in 140 years.
Well, it was quite exciting when we raised the poles for the first time on the upper part of the canyon. And when the first pole was going up, there was thunder in the background and it was raining, and well, it was quite an honor.
It was really very emotional for me. It really touched my heart.
A treaty will open the economic door for us to reclaim who we are as a people. Are there viable options to the treaty? Well, we could take our grievances to court and let judges decide what is fair and best for our people. This, however, is a very dangerous route to travel. Non-native people would be interpreting the laws and deciding what our rights are. There's no room for negotiations in the legal system. We could also resort to protest and civil disobedience. This method has done little across the country other than bringing the issues to the front. The end result is that anger and frustration are stirred up on both sides, and often our people end up in jail. Or we could simply do nothing and maintain the status quo. What would this mean for our people? It means we would move backward. It would mean we would continue to lose our lands, our resources, and our unique identity as Kitselas. We need only to look at our past to recognize that we need to take strong action if we want to have a future. That strong action is a treaty.
We need more of our people to understand what a treaty really is. Read our treaty website. Read the documents that we send out. Discuss them with each other. Talk to one another. Talk to us. Because it's the people themselves that are going to govern. More involvement and understanding means a better governance in the future.
Treaty will not be the answer for all of our issues. However, it will provide the tools for the future of the Kitselas First Nation, in which we can build healthy, self-sustaining, self-governing communities with a solid land base and with continuous access to natural resources. A treaty will settle long-standing disputes and right historical wrongs. A treaty will restore and provide certainty, responsibility, and opportunity for our people that we never thought possible. Join with us to ensure that our rights are constitutionally protected so that we can reclaim our place in Canada as proud Kitselas people.
Look at the mountains, look at this valley, look at the river that winds out to the sea. Take a look at the hillside, look at this clear blue sky. This is the place that I would want to be. Take a look at the mountain, look at this valley, look at the river that winds out to the sea. Take a look at the hillside, look at this clear blue sky. This is the place that I would want to be.